Welcome to the Boaters Podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things boating, from comments to news to anything that goes on in the boating world. I'm your host, Aaron. I've been working on boats for many, many years. This show is actually brought to you by you, those of you that purchase merch and support our work. So what are your thoughts on the fastest chase boats to hunt down criminals? I guess something about running down drug runners. Let's see what boats we got on this list. USA Harbor Guard 40-foot Interceptor. That looks like an interesting boat. What do we got as far as stats here? 300 to 350 horsepower, 63 mile an hour, 55 knots, top speed. Dubai Police X-Cat, the Lamborghini of the Seas, Twin Mercury 350. This is a race boat. This isn't like, they don't use this for running down criminals, do they? No, there's no way. Not core for police work. Yeah, okay. I didn't think so. So that one's not, that's like more for racing, promotion, sponsorships. What else we got? China's Minjiao Jun 2001, operated by the China Maritime Safety Administration for port traffic control. Top speed is 26 knots, 30 miles an hour. This thing is designed for geographic coverage and enforcement rather than pure chase capabilities. Yeah, I would say so. That thing doesn't, 30 miles an hour, what are you going to catch? Nothing, 30 miles an hour, you're not going to catch much. Not in today's world. England, United K, Dorset Police Patrol Vessels, Sentinel and Invictus, top speeds of 48 knots, 55 mile an hour, coastal rapid response. I don't know who comes up with these lists, but like this, I think there's beginning to be way too much AI content on the internet. The internet is becoming an AI wasteland where people are just making cheap content full of AI-generated stuff. Armandale class patrol boats, Royal Australian Navy, top speed of 29 miles an hour, 56 meters. These are big boats. I don't know. I don't really have a comment. I think a better comment would be something that I find interesting and that I like is speed limits, on different channels and stuff. I think that's actually probably more of a more relevant topic outside of these chase boats running down criminals and drug runners, because boats these days go a lot quicker than they used to. So if you're only doing 40 mile an hour, you ain't going to be catching much. And that, the X-Cat, that's like promotional stuff. So I don't think that's got anything to do with catching criminals. But I was just talking about this the other day with a buddy of mine. We were out in the ICW and talking about how there's different areas that have like 30 mile an hour speed zones. And I'm honestly for that. Now, granted, okay, if there was an Audubon here and we could do 150 down the highway, I would do that. So I'm not advocating for that kind of speed limit, but I think that there's a lot of areas where, how do I say this? There's a lot of boaters out there that are, whenever they talk about DUIs and accident stuff, they say, driving under the influence, driving intoxicated, or distracted drivers. So meaning people on their cell phones, old people that aren't paying attention to anything, doing 20 miles an hour under the speed limit, those cause accidents. And you can basically quadruple that on a boat, because on a boat, distracted drivers are like, there's so much going on the boat that like most captains are distracted. So I think having in certain areas like the ICW and other areas, it's actually a good thing to have speed limits on those areas, because now that you've got boats that do 55, they do 70, 65, 70 miles an hour, it's a lot more dangerous. So that's something I think is more relevant as a topic, is that certain areas, certain lakes, certain waterways having speed limits on them, I'm all for that. I think that's a good idea. And it's not necessarily for, stopping people from doing something. It's more protecting people from those distracted drivers that haven't handled a boat. They don't know the waterways. They don't know the signs and how to stay in between what navigational buoy does what and what beacon does what. They don't know where they're going or what they're doing. And if they're in a boat that's now doing 60, that's how people get hurt really bad. So I think there's a good debate that could be had there from both sides. Obviously, once you know your waterways, you don't want to, if there's this one channel way and there's never anybody there, but there's like a 30 mile an hour speed limit on it, I could see where's the line, because you could debate both sides on whether it's a good thing to have the speed limit here or where it's not. And the problem with control and government is once they take a little bit, you ain't never getting it back. So, that kind of discussion, I think, could be had on both sides of like who's dictating where there should be a speed limit, where there shouldn't be a speed limit. Is it a length of a channel or a width of a channel or something like that? But I do think that there are certain areas that, it's a pretty good thing that there are speed limits that, keep people from doing 65 miles an hour on the water in channelways where one distraction and you are in somebody's backyard or you are up on the rocks, you're throwing someone out the boat. Like 60 in a car is a lot different than 60 on the water. As soon as you hit ground, like people get hurt. You get thrown in shallow water into rocks, hit your head. Like it's, thrown onto the dash. On the T-top, bust your head on the aluminum. Like definitely dangerous with top speeds and high speeds like that. So, as far as this whole chasing down criminals thing, I guess cool topic. I don't know. Maybe it's just me that isn't finding it. I think also it might be a little bit of AI in there. So that's what I kind of got on that discussion. So let's go into some questions. Boat Fixer Guy says, so you're replacing the outdrive because of some corrosion. If it's pressure tests good, why replace it and then replace it with an SEI? I'd rather have the corroded Merc drive. Yeah, it had a bent prop shaft. It wasn't that it was just corroded. Yeah, it was corroded pretty bad, but the skeg was broke. The anti-ventilation plate was broke. The upper had the anti-ventilation. Well, that's not even... See, what do you call the fin on the upper drive? So the lower unit has the anti-ventilation plate, which is to stop ventilation to the propeller. What it would be the fin that is above on the upper called? That's a good question to ask. I don't know what you would technically call that. It's not an anti-ventilation plate, so maybe a trim fin. I don't know, trim something or other. But that was broke on the upper, bent prop shaft. So yeah, the drive was trash. That's why we got rid of that drive, mainly because the skeg, the ventilation plate, and the front of it, as well as the bent prop shaft. You don't want to use that. That thing's going to blow up soon, and, I'm not in it for that. I like fixing things to where, like, I don't want downtime. I don't want to go to the ramp, be out on the water, and, like, blow something up and be stuck somewhere, You got enough trouble when you run aground and do all that kind of stuff. So, Sinor Mayajub said, should do a fuel comparison. What are we talking about? Twin 150s versus a single 300. The single 300 wins hands down, especially at slow speeds. I have twin F-150s in my boat, and it's thirsty. Mike Bogg says, really, I read somewhere that twins aren't that much different on fuel economy because they don't have to work as hard as a pair versus a single. Not disagreeing with you, just curious how much worse. Yeah, there's a lot of boats out there that have these comparisons done on them that you can either get it with a single 300 or the twin 150s. And honestly, it really depends on the boat, because the shape of the hull and the use of the boat matter drastically. If it's a light boat, then yeah, the twin 150s and the 300s are going to be very, very similar. If it's a very heavy boat, then one's going to consume more because you're doing more work. The single will be more depending on your RPM versus the single. But at wide open throttle, that's going to be what it is. At mid-range, there's going to be tiers to this. So at lower speeds, you're going to consume less. At higher speeds, you're going to consume more. So, how fast can you afford to go? At fully wide open throttle, the twins are going to consume more fuel than the single, of course. Or if your boat is extremely heavy, then yeah, the twins are going to consume a lot because it's pushing a big, heavy boat. But if you were to put a single 300 on there, I wouldn't say that your fuel consumption is going to be that much better, because you're going to have the same speed and the same performance. You're going to burn a good amount of fuel too. There will be a curve in there on the way to the top where the single will be better than the twins, and then the twins will be better than the single. And like, it all depends on the boat and the weight of the boat, the shape of the hull, and how you use the boat. Are you running wide open throttle all the time? Are you trolling all the time? If you're trolling all the time, then depending on the speed that you're trolling, are you high speed trolling, are you slow speed trolling, like the single's going to get better fuel economy because it's a single, not a twin. But at the same time, at really low speeds, the twins, because it is double, even though it is a smaller engine, it's still going to consume more because you're keeping the engine running basically, and it takes more to keep two engines running than it does one single. So yeah, I mean, there's too many variables in there to do a comparison. When that's the problem with boats, is that everybody wants a concrete answer in between a variable of 10,000 different situations, and everybody uses their boat differently. And so in one situation, something's going to be better than another. Michael Edafio says, hi, can fuel cooler not cooling cause the engine of a Merc EFI to stall? Yes. Anything that has a fuel cooler, what happens is your fuel can vaporize. So because of the engine getting hot and your fuel rails are normally bolted right onto the intake, depending on where it is, it's going to get hot inside there. And the fuel, once it goes through the VST and all that and pressurize, now all of a sudden it can heat up, and it will get to a point where that fuel can start to vaporize or atomize before it gets through the injector, which can stall the engine because you're basically putting air into the cylinder. So yes, anytime your fuel gets hot, it can vaporize, and yeah, your engine's going to stall because you're running out of fuel. You got more air than you got fuel, and you don't have the right ratio, the stoichiometric ratio, where it's, perfect 14.7 to 1 counts of air versus fuel. And so, yeah, if you mess with that ratio too far, if you've got, half that ratio, your engine's it's not gonna run, because you need to have the right ratio of air and fuel and the right timing in order for it to combust and complete the correct cycle of an engine. Okay, JD Pauly says, I have a 150 horsepower Optimax. Should I remove the poppet valve when I ridlime treat? I know I have to remove the thermostats. Yeah, I would remove the poppet valve. Any of that stuff in the cooling system, remove your poppet valve, remove your thermostats. I'd remove the lower unit and put it right in through the water tube going up. That's, generally the best way to do that. I tried to do it differently on the Merc Cruiser than I did with the outboard. On the outboard, it's usually right there at the water tube. You hook it up to that and then pump it straight up into the engine, and it does everything. I wasn't sure that I was going to have enough pressure, which I probably didn't even think about that much because I have an 1,800 gallon per hour or whatever it is fuel pump, or not fuel pump, but water pump, in order to pump that through the engine. And that's a big V8 block. So that was my thought, was pushing it through that intake. I wouldn't have the pressure in order to fill the block and have it cycle properly. So I tried to bring it up to the top and then cycle it through the top, which I probably could have came through the intake there at the lower unit and just pushed it right through there. Next time I do one of those, I will be doing it that way just to try it. But I mean, you live and you learn. That's kind of why I like making these videos, because then I do the job and the project, and then when I get done, I publish it, boom, everybody sees it, and then, somebody else that's smarter than me or has a different perspective than me is going to look at it and say, hey, why didn't you do it this way? And then I'm like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I should have done that way. So, yeah, for sure. I'll try that next time, and whichever way is better, that's the way to do it. So awesome. But yeah, take out poppet valve, take out the thermostat whenever you ridlime it, for sure. All right, Seth Parr says, if I understand correctly, you got the carrier and pinion nut off without the use of official Merc Cruiser tools designed for exactly those purposes, right? Wow, amazing. So that lower unit, that video of how a lower unit works, that was actually done on a 40 horsepower Yamaha lower unit. So not a Merc Cruiser, not bigger ones. The small lower units, I would say up to, actually, no, that was a 25. So I would say over a 25, 30, once you hit a 40 horsepower lower unit and up, you generally need special tools. You can't generally take those apart like you can a 2.5 horse up to a 30 horse, because on a 30 horse and below, you generally only have 2 bolts to hold the carrier in. You can take those out, and then you can get a wrench right on the pinion nut and get it off. The only thing that you might need would be something to fit onto the splines of the drive shaft. But outside of that, as soon as you hit a 40 horsepower lower unit and up, I'm trying to think of a brand that would not work for this blanket statement, but I can't think of one. I think 40 horse and up, you're going to need special tools because you're going to need a spanner nut tool to get the spanner nut out. Then you're going to need to have a jaw puller to get the bearing carrier out. You're going to need something to hold the pinion nut because generally you're either going to have to get a cheap wrench, which that's kind of the way I've done a lot of them though, is you go to Harbor Freight, get the Pittsburgh, get the, what's the other brand that they have at Harbor Freight? It's a cheap brand. Pittsburgh, and there's one other one that I got. Like he starts with a C or something, but those ones, because they're thinner, and usually you can fit those over the pinion nut that then can hold it, because the pinion nut comes down and the nut is in between your pinion gear and your clutch dog. So a very little bit of space there. So having a wrench that fits down on there, then grabbing the splines. Usually the splines have to have the tool to put that off. To put it back together, though, that's when it comes to being like you're going to need special tools. Other than that, the rest of it generally is all regular tools. Oh, and then also you're going to need a special tool to get the drive shaft bearing carrier nut off that holds the drive shaft bearing carrier. That's going to need a special tool to get off. Other than that, yeah, 40 horse and up, you need all those tools. 30 horse and down, yeah, generally you can get them. You can do everything with the exception of the tool that holds the drive shaft, because the bearing carrier on the drive shaft, those are usually built into the carrier seals. So the drive shaft seals are usually in a carrier that is, you take the nuts out and then pry that thing out and it comes out as an assembly. So that's what I would say there. So sorry to confuse you on that one. Peter Caput Sos. Probably should have a ground strap if you're touching circuitry on those boards, fragile things susceptible to static electricity. Another thing to try is to clean those green scum connections with flux remover or isopropyl alcohol using a small brush. Check for cold solder joints, not likely, but nothing to lose. I agree with you. Whenever you're taking gauges apart and trying to redo the screens and stuff like that and save older gauges, generally when it gets into the circuit boards, I don't mess with that stuff. I mean, like I can build computers, I can take laptops apart, like I can do all that stuff. I got no problem with that. I can take it apart, put it together, build it from scratch, no problem. Getting into the actual circuitry and soldering stuff, I don't get into that. It's one thing to put thermal paste on a CPU and a heatsink. It's another thing to be desoldering circuits and pulling pins out and putting them back in and cleaning that. Like that's a little bit more than I get involved into electrical stuff like that. But obviously, Peter, you know all about that stuff. So you probably right. I probably could get some isopropyl alcohol and put that on that green stuff. It might clean it off a little bit and make that gauge work. Sometimes I just cut the cord on stuff too. I'm like, you know what? Next project, either I get to a certain point, it's like, okay, is it worth my time to do it or not? So, there's always that. All right, Josh Hubbard says, what is the purpose of these second controlled towers? Josh has probably not been offshore fishing, which is not a big deal. You should go if you get the chance. But in good conditions, clean water, especially South Florida, the Caribbean, anywhere where you got clean water, having a tower is awesome. It is so that way you get visibility into the water. You don't really realize it. I mean, even the half towers, people call them half towers, Key West towers, whatever you want to call them, where you stand on the console and you're up above it. The amount of visibility that you get from being 5, 6, 10 feet higher, you're looking down into the water, and when the sun's out, like you can see so much more. I mean, especially when you're offshore and you can see 30, 40, 50 feet down in the water, like you can see schools of fish, you can see what the fish are, like you can see what's going on. And so it is, it's a massive advantage is the reason that people have those. And then even if you're like on like bay boats and stuff, having that half tower, like you can see, like you get on a flats or something and like you get up in there, you can see stuff. I mean, your visibility is just 2-3 times better. So it's all about visibility. And if you're up there, you're going to want to be able to control the boat. So you need the controls. That's why you have the controls up there. And a lot of people have their, your rod set up and stuff in the back. So that way you can have, like, let's say you got your spinners ready with some chunk bait on them. You can be kind of putzing around, cruising around up in that tower, being able to see down in the water and looking at stuff and be able to cast at something. Whereas if you're down in the cockpit, normal driving, like, you're looking across the water, you can't really see something that's, swimming around out there, depending on how far away it is, because of the glare. I mean, even with good glasses, it does cut that down to a point, but it's a lot different than changing your angle and getting 5 feet higher and then looking down in there and looking that 30 feet out and being able to cast onto something and, or around it to try and spark it to bite. Like, definitely an advantage with that. So that's what's up with those. Jonan No says, when mounting the engine, do you need to wait the full 24 hour for the 5200 to cure, or could you hit the water 2-3 hours after? I don't even put 5200 on engines. I use 4200. That 5200 is way too permanent and it cures. It's runny. Like, it's just nasty stuff. I use 4200, and yeah, you can a couple hours and splash the boat. That stuff is like, 3M makes a really good product. I mean, let's be honest here. 3M really does make a really good product. And the 3M 4200, yeah, within a couple hours, you're pretty safe. I'm sure that there is a label that says how long before it touches water, but it cures way quicker than you think. And then also, when you think about what you're doing, like, you're literally smashing, here's your transom, here's your bracket, like them, you're smashing those things together. They are pulled together tight. That sealant is, it smushes out within there, and like, it dries very quickly. Now, the sealant that's on the bolt on the inside, that might take 24 hours for that to fully cure, but you're not going to get water penetration through there. It's not going to happen. And once you actually use this stuff, let that thing sit for 20 minutes and try and clean it off. Oh, nightmare. It's done. Like, you need to clean it off immediately. Like, 10 minutes is too long. Like, as soon as it smashes out, yeah, that's been my experience. I'm sure there's a instruction manual for the sealant time, but yeah. If you don't clean it off within 10 minutes, it's a disaster getting it off. So, yeah, a couple hours and you're pretty much water ready. Glenn Bruno says, how hard is it to convert over a 1996 two-stroke 200 wiring over to a mid-2010 to 2020 four-stroke 200 using the same gauges? I've read a small harness may need to be bought to convert certain things. Love the videos. Thank you for the insight and knowledge. To keep your same gauges from 1996, depends on what they are. If you're talking about Yamaha gauges, then depends on the engines. Or do you have DEC engines? Because that generally is not going to work. But if you have command link gauges, it will. If you've got just the multifunction gauges, it is just a dip switch. So, like, let's say you've got a 2010, we're talking about 200. So It all depends on what gauge you have. The multifunction gauge, on the back of that gauge on the tack, there's 3 dip switches. The first is for the trim sensor. The second is for the pulsar, which is based on the stator. And the third is 2-stroke, 4-stroke. So you can flip the dip switch down to, or flip it up to 4-stroke. Down for your pulsar on 200 is probably going to be a 6. It'll be down, or 3-phase. And then the trim, you probably need to flip that up because it's probably down with your trim sensor. But yeah, you might need an adapter for those wires. I know they make there's the 2-pin to 4-pin plugs, so there might be an adapter that you need, but kind of really depends on what gauge you have on whether or not it's usable. But if you're going to, let's say a 2.8 liter F200, yeah, your 96 gauge, that multifunction gauge, you probably not, because you're probably going to be running command link on the 200 4-stroke. So you might not be able to use that. There might be an adapter to go from command link to the regular multifunction digital gauge, whatever they got. but I'm not 100% sure on that one. Josh Smith says vinegar is all you need to get rid of salt deposits. Yeah, vinegar does great on cleaning stuff, but there's not always salt deposits. I mean, I think a lot of people say salt water and you think just salt, but the type of salt water completely different. Like, there's calcium, there's lime, there's rust, there's the salt, there's all the minerals. Like, there's a lot of other mineral buildup that you get inside of an engine. Sometimes vinegar doesn't get rid of that, especially old inboard stuff like that. It's got, whatever those blocks are, steel or whatever they're made out of. Some of them are made out of steel. So, or not steel, iron or whatever it is. And they rust, like they rust from the inside out. There's full rust. So, vinegar don't get rid of that. And then also vinegar does pretty good on most stuff, but like the lime and the calcium buildup, that's another thing that I don't think vinegar really does that well on it. It all depends on how bad the buildup is. Ivan Vieiraa says, also I have a Cobia boat, 18 foot, and I bought it for $7,000. So I made a good buy. It does have a lot of luxury, but is a solid. It doesn't have a lot of luxury, but is a solid boat. The hull is built really good. Is a Cobia 2000 6-cylinder 2-stroke. I'm a new boater and probably made a mistake. Please let me know. Thank you. I mean, I don't know. $7,000. Well, $7,000 for an 18-foot with a 6-cylinder 2-stroke. It depends on the condition. A 2000 boat, yeah, they go for probably around $7,000. 18-foot Cobia, as long as it's in good condition and like it's not all clapped out. I mean, like that 17-foot Key West with the 90 horse, those things are like $8,000 to $15,000 depending on what kind of condition and what's all on it. So yeah, an 18-foot boat for $7,000 isn't necessarily a bad deal. It just depends on the condition. I mean, a 6-cylinder 2-stroke, what are we talking about here? Is it a Yamaha? Is it a Mercury? Is it a Suzuki? Is it clapped out? It's got 2,000 hours on it. It's all rusty. Like, is it in clean, good condition? So did it come with a GPS or anything else like that? All those kinds of, what was the cushions in? What kind of condition were those in? All that stuff plays into the value of it. So, I can't really say if you made a good decision or a mistake. I don't think you made a mistake. Honestly, I think you get into boating and you start learning stuff. It's nice to have a beater boat. Honestly, a lot of people get into things like, let's say, I guess it all depends on how you are financially. If you got money and it don't matter, then, you buy an 18-foot boat for $60,000 and you go around and learn on it, bashing into the dock, putting it on the trailer, putting it crooked, running aground when you don't know where you're at. Like, there's a lot of things that happen on the water that's kind of like, when you're learning boating, you don't necessarily want a nice, brand new, shiny, pretty boat. It's kind of nice having something that's got a couple nicks and dings on it that's kind of like, okay, when you drop a lead weight and chip something, it's like, okay, it's not the end of the world. You pull a fish up in the boat and he starts flopping around and the hook starts scraping down the gunnel, like, it's going to be all right. When someone else is driving it, your wife or whatever, and she pulls into the dock, trying to put it on the trailer and bumps the dock, it's going to be all right. So, and then also when you run aground, because when you run aground, if you ain't running aground, you ain't been around. So it happens. You do. Hopefully it's not coral rock or something like that, but yeah, you definitely nice to have a beater boat for your first boat, in my opinion. It's nice to learn on something that's not, you're not, as soon as you scratch it, you're like, oh no, it gives you anxiety because it's so pretty. Joey the Dime says, I have a 2016 Boston Whaler 210 Montauk with a 2016 Evinrude G2 E-Tech 200 HO that will need to be repowered soon. I was thinking about going with Suzuki. Would you go with the DF200A? 200 horsepower, 2.8 liter inline 4-cylinder, or the DF200T, 200 horsepower, 3.6 V6. I'd go with the V6 all day. Because that 200 HO, you're used to that boat performing with a 200 V6. I know it's the same 200 horsepower as 200 horsepower, but I would go with the 3.6 liter V6. There's no replacement for displacement. So I find that to hold true in boating, because it's a weight factor. Heavy boat, when you load it up, displacement is used to move weight. So no replacement for displacement. I would always go with the V6 over the inline 200. You start talking about smaller boats, lighter boats, then the 4-cylinders. I'm all about that kind of thing, or putting them with twins. But if I've got a choice between an inline 200 4-cylinder versus the V6, I'm going the V6 all day. Let's see here. John Rambo says the pea should be warm, not hot. If it's hot to the touch, your engine is overheating. I mean, I guess to a point. It depends on the engine. That's the thing about boating. There's always variables, because what you don't think about is that what engine are we talking about? Because some engines, that telltale is going through the, let's see, what all does it go through? On, like, let's say a Yamaha F350, it goes through the fuel cooler, it goes through the intake, it goes through the rectifier regulator, and then it goes out the telltale. So you're running water, cooling water, through your fuel system, it's heating up, through the intake to cool your air, heating up, through your rectifier regulator, electronic that's creating heat, heating up, and then pushing it out the telltale. So thermostats open up, depending on the model, 140, 150, 160. If that water's coming out at 140 degrees, it's going to be kind of hot to the touch, you know? I mean, like, so that doesn't necessarily mean that your engine is overheating if it's hot to the touch. I mean, it's going to be warm. Generally, it's going to be cooler, 120, 130 in the middle of the summertime, when, like, right now, you know, right now we're going into like peak summer, peak heat. So like August, September, the beginning of October, like that's, you know, this is hot. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It is usually 96, feels like 110, 115. So the water temp you might be running a water temp that's 90 degree water temp. Like that's hot water. So depending on where you're at, will play a factor in how hot that telltale is going to be, and also depending on your engine and what that telltale is going through. Now you take like a 90 horse that's coming straight out the water jacket, right out the thing, like that water's going to be water temp. So whatever the water temp is on your of the water, that's what temp your telltale is going to be, because the telltale is just a telltale. It has nothing to do with your cooling system on that model. So the model plays a big part on how hot your telltale is going to be. All right, let's see. We'll do a couple more. Actually, we'll just do one more. We'll go with Scratching for Stacks. He says, hello, Aaron. Love the content. Keep it coming. I will do my best. My question, I have a 2003 Bayliner 185 bow rider. The boat has a rebuilt motor I installed about 2 years ago, which is the 4.3-liter Mercruiser V6 raw water cooled. The port side block freeze plug has completely popped out once before. I then installed a new plug, and this season it is starting to come out again and leaking. I am in Central Texas, and it's hot here all the time. In the winter, the boat is put away with no water in the block. Why is this one freeze plug continuing to want to come out? Should I put in an oversized plug? The motor has less than 70 hours since installed. Most likely somebody cross-threaded that plug. That'd be my guess. Somebody, put that plug in at some point in time whenever they winterized that engine. They took it out, and when they put it back in, they cross-threaded it, or there could have been something that came out. Like you pick stuff up in your water system. So when you pull those drains, like you got junk pouring out of there that you might have picked up. Grass, sand, dirt, whatever. Like you're sucking stuff up off the bottom, all the time when you're running, especially if you're running shallow. So if there was, say, some sand came out, right? And that sand is now in the threads. You put the plug in there and it starts getting tight. You put the wrench on there and you give her the beans and go ahead and put it in there. You probably tore up the threads. And now, when it got put in there, it's tight, good to go, no problems. When you take it out, all the threads come out with it and it's probably stripped out. So, tapping it and putting a new oversized one, that would work. Or hopefully you can inspect it, get down there with a mirror and a flashlight and look up in there and take a look at what those threads look like. If there are still threads there and they're not in bad condition, with your new plug, put Teflon tape on there. That'd be fine. You put some Teflon tape on there, that's going to put it's going to put something that's going to help to seal it and get the threads to get tight So that's what I would do. I would pull it out and look up in there, see what those threads look like, and then Teflon tape that plug, stick it back in there, and then that should hopefully fix the issue. That's what I would do with a lot of, I mean, those are little old tricks like you do, like when you've got worn out threads or something, Teflon tape or putting something in there, you put a screw in something and it's stripped out, stick a zip tie in there and send your screw in that zip tie, and that screw, it's going to go in on that zip tie and it's going to get tight. So like, you know, there's multiple different ways to skin a cat. So that's what I would do. Most likely them threads are messed up. Hopefully they're not messed up too bad and the Teflon tape trick would work, but you don't know till you get down there, take it out with a mirror, flashlight, check it out. That's it for this week, you guys. We'll see you guys next week. Hey there, sorry to take you away from the video, but real quick, did you know that on average a boat owner will spend between $1,000 and $5,000 a year just on servicing their engine? And you could actually pocket and save a lot of that money if you would just do the service yourself. It might seem like a daunting task, but I guarantee you virtually everyone can do it with our guidance and the Boaters program. This is just one skill that you could learn inside the program because we have hundreds of other videos teaching you all kinds of boating skills, as well as a weekly live stream where we have questions and answers with me, as well as a chat feature where you can send videos and pictures, ask all kinds of questions, or look for some advice or some guidance on a project that you're doing on your boat. You can join the program by hitting the first link in the description, clicking join, or visiting bornagainboating.com. Now back to the video.